Welcome. Today I'll be over unboxing of the Pixel 8a, and in a separate video I'll also take a look at the case that came with the device itself. So anyway, let's just get straight into it. Now we get a Type-C to Type-C charging cable, and we get a Type-C to Type-A dongle. That's actually, I always really liked Google including these. I would also like it very much if they actually included a freaking charger in a box, but for the environment, we don't. That's why we produce e-waste, but we don't give you a way to actually charge it. Fantastic. Now, in a second you'll see the OS right here, but before that, let's talk about the display right here. So the display is 6.1 inches and it's a 1080 by 2400 resolution. It is a OLED display with 120 Hz refresh rate and a peak brightness of 2000 nits with support for HDR, though not HDR10+, so it's not certified basically. It also boasts an 81.6% screen to body ratio and a pixel density of over 400, more precisely 430 pixels per inch. The glass covering the display right here is Cornell Gorilla Glass 3. And then if we flip it over to the cameras, we have a dual camera setup. The main sensor right here is a 64 megapixel wide sensor f 1.926mm, and then 13 megapixel f2.2 120 degree ultra wide lens. And with those cameras at the back, you can record videos at 4K, 30 and 60. And also 1080p 3060 slow motion 120 and 240 with optical image stabilization. Then at the front, and that hole punch camera for some reason, because I guess for a phone that is probably catering towards photos, I don't really see problem here. But I really like to start seeing this under display cameras and not the hole punched one. But anyway, and that is holding a 13 megapixel f2.2 20mm ultra wide lens that can record videos at 4K 30 frames and 1080p 30 frames. Okay, with that out of the way, let's talk about the internals right here. So for such a small device, this actually has a pretty decent battery size at 4000, almost 500 milliamps. And it supports a power delivery 3.0, which doesn't really specify the actual power, like the wattage that it can deliver, unfortunately. And it also supports 7.5 watts of wireless charging, so that's pretty nice. Considering this is an A series, supporting wireless charging, that is pretty nice. And because this is also Pixel, you will find a decent array of accessories that are trying to just mimic the Apple ecosystem with their MagSafe. So you can utilize Apple wireless chargers with like some Chinese cases that have the MagSafe magnets on there, and have access to a bit bigger array of different accessories that you can utilize instead of with iPhone with your Pixel 8a. Now, continuing on, the device is being powered by a Google Tensor G3 processor. Comes with 8 GB of RAM and 128 GB of storage, or 256. And that is running on UFS 3.1 storage type with no expandable storage, unfortunately. Now, in terms of OS right here, we have the newest Android 14 running on here, which is no surprise. And because this is also Google, if I remember correctly, we'll be getting like what, 5 years of support. So you're going to be getting pretty decent updates into the future for these devices. Now keep in mind it's Google, and they're claiming the longer support for the devices right now, but because it's Google, I wouldn't hold my breath on that, because the moment they realize that it's not economically viable for them and doesn't bring them decent enough revenue, they're just gonna cut their costs, and that will include the people that bought into this with hopes of having like 5 years of software updates, and they just won't. So let's be honest, when it comes down to a closet full of skeletons, Google has the biggest one. So don't hold your breath on their promises. Now, last thing to mention is the price, and the device comes at $499. That obviously isn't including tax, so it's going to be more like $500. And honestly, it seems like a pretty decent device, though personally I'll put it from my perspective, and my perspective is of a person that isn't that big of a fan of overpaying for software. Because considering Google as an Android started as an open project, and Google is now just trying to kill it off and also give you more reasons to go for their devices, and instead of doing that with a better hardware, they're trying to do that with a better software that initially was open source, but it's now so far from it that it's not even worth comparing those two together. I would consider this to be kind of like a scam in a way, at least when you consider the fact that these two should be the same, but they're so far apart nowadays that they're not. So they're trying to get users based on their system, which what they're trying to cater to is additional features of just the OS, making it still clean with very minimal bloatware and all that stuff. And honestly, the OS is pretty good, but where the device then tends to fall apart is the hardware. And for $500 freaking dollars, you're not getting that much. This is a basically mid-range device that doesn't really feel like a mid-range, to be completely honest. Some of the things that I want to point out additionally that might not be visible from the get-go is the size of this device. Obviously this is more catering towards users that want a smaller device, which is fine. And the build quality right here, aluminum frame, but then you have, instead of glass back like the other ones do, this is plastic. So that's already taking away from the quality, and this is a mid-range priced device with a plastic back. It just doesn't feel like a device that costs $500. So yeah, I do want to stress on that, because it is a very important part of a device when you're overpaying for it, and you might not be getting as good of a device as you might think. This OS could be installed basically on any kind of device if Google wanted to do this, but they don't. And they're basically trying to gatekeep their Google version from other devices that are, or from Android, from other devices that are also running Android. So they're getting shafted versions of Android that's supposed to be accessible to everyone, just so they can sell their devices a little bit better. And with that, you get a hiked up price for a Google Tensor G3. As far as I remember, this processor is not going to be that great. Let's just see. So Tensor G3, let's compare it to old Snapdragon. This is kind of a crappy site. Let's try to find something else. So I'm looking basically at comparisons between Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. Not the fairest comparison, considering this is more of a flagship processor, but it starts to be fair when you consider that, for instance, Poco X6 exists, or more precisely X6 Pro, which comes at a cheaper price while offering basically equivalent of this processor in terms of Dimensity 8300 Ultra, I think it was. So in terms of cores, it's about the same as the Snapdragon Gen 2, 8 Gen 2 more precisely. Clock-wise, it's lower. What else we got? So it has A cores and B cores, okay, and also C cores, but all of them are always lower in clock. GPU frequency. So apparently, in terms of GPU frequency, it has a higher clock at 0.89 gigahertz compared to the Snapdragon 0.68. So don't really know how that would equate to actual real life performance. I would really like to see scoring, which would have been probably the quickest and best way to compare this to, but I am struggling with finding anything that is associated with this kind of look at it. But in any case, I highly doubt it's going to be equivalent to this. I'm gonna check one last thing before I say anything else. So I'm checking out the previous pixels. So basically the Google Tensor G, at least G2, I'm pretty certain, was in collaboration with Samsung's, and basically what it was the Exynos with some additional AI cores and just tweaking from Google to give you, well, try to give you a better processor, right? So because it was at its core a Samsung's processor, and these were always shittier compared to Snapdragon's, while being charged for the same phone more, or maybe not more, the same, for a lesser device that was running Exynos instead of Snapdragon, because Samsung at one point was selling Exynos in Europe and Snapdragons in US. So US was always getting the better devices. They kind of dropped this nowadays. I think it was when about roughly where they started the partnership with Google. So Google got their shitty processors, but as far as I am aware, Google did cut the partnership. So either this is the last device that is running on Exynos, with the name being Google Tensor G3, or it's just their already fully in-house processor. But in any case, it doesn't compare to the flagship processors that you can get nowadays. And with that in mind, you can buy other devices that are better than this in terms of hardware specifically over this one. And in terms of software, this one obviously will always take the crown, as it's made by Google on Android. So it's their system tweaked by them to be even better. But like I said, I just find this to be kind of a scummy move in a way. I don't really support this, but obviously there are people that really love Pixel devices. Just my perspective on Pixels is it's a software that could be put on any other device if Google wanted to do so, which arguably I would believe they should be putting the same version, maybe not at the time of release, maybe give the same features to other devices like a year later or so, but it should be going in there. They're all running on Android. There's no reason why this Android 14 is better than other Android 14, and that's kind of where my problem stems from. And it just seems kind of scammy because they own Android and they get to get away with this. So there we go. But at the end of the day, it's an okay device. I personally wouldn't pay for it $500, considering it just doesn't feel like a $500 device. So that's basically my stance on it. And it might be controversial. Obviously, if you like it, that's fantastic. The device will obviously work as it's intended fantastically, though I would like to have a little bit more for the money. Now, with that being said, hopefully you found this video helpful, and if you did, don't forget to smash like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.